Huge debate. Should women in Utah be sent to jail for intentionally miscarrying a baby? The Utah governor may soon sign a bill that makes self-abortions a criminal act. This big debate began with a specific case here. Pregnant 17-year-old paid a man $150 to kick her stomach and beat her. She was 7 months pregnant. The baby survived, was later adopted by a Utah couple. Now, as for the teen, no punishment. A judge ruled seeking an abortion is not illegal. Now, Utah may have a new law that could make that girl's actions a crime, but critics say the bill could be a slippery slope, creating suspicion against anyone who has a miscarriage. Want to hear from you on this? You know the number, 1-877-TEL-HLN. Joining me to talk about this, Utah State Representative Carl Wimmer. He's also a former police officer introducing this legislation, by the way. And joining us as well, back with us, Nicole DeBoer, our attorney. All right, Carl, you saw this case unfold, and nothing happened to the teenager, right? So then you took action. What did you want to see happen in this case?
Yeah, that's right. In fact, she was charged originally. However, in the court ruling, the judge said that Utah had a provision in our law that said that no matter what way a woman tries to terminate her pregnancy and to kill her unborn child, she could not be held liable. The citizens were outraged, and as a representative, I moved forward with some legislation to close that loophole.
So there was no law on the books, none, that should have prosecuted here, or something should have been done.
We have a current law in the books called homicide of a fetus, but that's in the homicide code. It conflicted with our abortion code, which said that a woman could never be held criminally liable. And so those two codes conflicted with one another, and that's where we came. That's how we got to where we are now.
Okay, let's bring in Nicole DeBoer on this. Nicole, as you look at, does the law need to change here? Because we look at that specific case and think that's inhumane what happened. If a guy is kicking the stomach of a 17-year-old, inhumane obviously to her and also to this unborn baby. She was 7 months pregnant.
And that's exactly right. I mean, the facts of that particular case are so horrendous that any decent-minded person would want to do something to prevent that kind of thing from happening in the future. The problem with the proposed statute is that there's a provision in it which allows for a person who has somehow recklessly caused this miscarriage to occur to be prosecuted. And that creates a huge problem for both the prosecution and for the defense of someone who might be in that circumstance, because there's a big difference between someone knowingly and intentionally going and doing what this particular teen did versus somebody who happens to have a miscarriage and then everybody debates about what caused the miscarriage.
Okay. Carl, let's talk about that, because that's a lot of people cite examples of, okay, what is reckless? I mean, someone who's pregnant, if you dye your hair or eat sushi or something, I mean, what falls under the category of reckless?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those are huge problems, because doctors give all kinds of advice to people who are pregnant about what kinds of things they shouldn't do, and those things could be construed as reckless. Those women could be prosecuted under this statute.
Okay, Carl, go ahead and address that.
Sure. Well, first of all, failing to follow doctor's orders or even following a doctor's orders is exempted out of this law if you read it. So there is immunity there. Reckless is a very, very defined line in Utah. It's very, very well known what it is. And what it is this. You have to engage in action that consists of an unjustifiable risk and take action that is a gross deviation from what the reasonable person would engage in. So it really is a high standard. It's an overt action. It's not a mistake, and it's not a tragic miscarriage, which we all know that happens. We took the term negligent out of it because we didn't want to get along the lines where women are having miscarriages and police are knocking on their door.
Yeah, I mean, we all know that's traumatic enough.
Absolutely.
The last thing you want to do is there's this suspicion hanging over you after you have a miscarriage, which is traumatic for so many. Hey, let's get a call in real quick. Don's with us in Nevada. Don, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, my mother was in an abusive relationship with my father for 30 years. And for women, out here, like we have Shade Tree and some of these places where battered women can go, they lock you out for 2 hours a day. And these abusers will find you. It happened to a lady that was staying there that was between 19 and 20 years old, was pregnant. He forced her back into the car, took her back home, shoved her out a window after beating the hell out of her, and then she lost the baby. And for women that work in different places out there in Utah where it snows, you can't predict that there's going to be ice on the ground. And if they go to work and they slip and fall and have a miscarriage, then you're going to be prosecuting them too. But for people to prosecute women that want to, that have no choice because, they're afraid that they're going to be killed if they leave their abusive partner. And
Okay.
the police I know out here have been, dropping the ball as well as,
All right.
For protecting women.
Don, let me take your
can't
question.
prosecute
Yeah,
for
let me
that.
take your question to Carl. Thanks for the call. Okay, Carl, there has been that example. What about situations of domestic abuse? I mean, that's
Right.
just horrific to even think about. But how does this law that you're proposing handle that?
In the cases of domestic abuse, and I've heard that argument before, or slipping and falling on ice, neither of those situations rise to any amount of criminal intent. We're talking about criminal intent. We're not talking about just simple reckless behavior. We're talking about taking an overt action, an unjustifiable action that is a gross deviation from what the reasonable person would do. Nothing that the caller mentioned would be a gross deviation from what the reasonable person would do, and therefore would not even come close to reaching the standard that is written into this law.